Hello, all you Shutter Media viewers. I really appreciate you guys coming back and joining me again. In this one today, I want to talk about lenses, specifically the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 autofocus for Sony E-mount cameras. This one is a special one because it not only is it budget friendly, but it offers a 1.4, a fast autofocus, and many other features. In this one, what I actually want to do is talk about the features, the functions, the pros, and some of the cons that I've found through over the past 8 months of ownership. So what I really want to talk about first off is features. And like I said, this one has actually a pretty good amount of them for the price point. The first feature and the thing that you're going to notice most of all when you make this purchase is that f1.4 aperture. It's wide, it's open, it allows for that shallow depth of field, low light shooting, and it's a great prime lens for any novice or beginner photographer to start with when they're on a budget. This f1.4 really allows me to shoot in dim lighting while achieving clear images, as well as attaining that shallow depth of field that I'm really looking for, and that bokeh that really just gives a more professional type of look. The second thing that I want to mention is the autofocus. For me, Sony cameras already have a pretty good autofocus. Stepper motor that this one has really allows the auto eye focus, animal eye catch to really sync with the Sony well, and very seldom times do I find it out of focus. Some of the lenses do have a switch that enables you to go from manual back to auto. Mine in particular didn't come with that. I'm not sure if there was a different price or something that I missed when making the purchase, but I guess it's something that I might recommend. So a great feature of this lens is also that it's a 23mm, which really formats itself to a 35mm when using it on a crop sensor body. I like this focal length because it allows me to shoot in a wide variety of ways, such as portraits, landscapes, architecture, nighttime, and so on. Another great feature is that I believe it's a compact lens. I feel that it's very nice, lightweight, but it does have a metal, durable body. It's nice and chunky, and it feels good in the hand. It's got a good weight to it. Adding it onto the camera, it really syncs up well, and it's very durable. So what I want to also do is talk about some of the functions of this lens and how I've used it over the past 8 months of ownership. I find that the wide aperture and 23mm focal length make it ideal for environmental portraits. You know, the slightly wider perspective encourages interaction between the subject and their environment. I believe it tells a story beyond the person's face, revealing context and mood. I also really like to use this lens for street photography and catching the hustle and bustle of everyday life. I believe it really works well for street photography and travel, events, and some documentary style shots. I feel that you can really seamlessly transition from capturing environmental portraits to wider scenes without having to change the lens. The smooth autofocus and the wide aperture really lend itself well to vlogging and videography. Now, the lack of in-body stabilization is one thing, so when the camera is stable, I like to use this lens more oftentimes for interview setups. You know, it gives me the option to include scenes as well as my subject, and that 1.4 really gives my backgrounds that out of focus look that I'm really trying to shoot for. And because of that 1.4 aperture, sometimes it lets so much light in during daytime shoots that I often add a ND filter 1 to 9 stops to help kind of balance the light in the setting that I'm going for. Currently, I've used the lens most oftentimes in my interview setups for a medium front shot, so because I can still get the subject as well as the surroundings, and I feel like the camera and the 1.4 just give me everything that I'm looking for. And then I want to talk about some of the pros and cons. I think some of the biggest pros so far that I found with the lens is that it's sharp. I find that most of my images with the right settings and the non-user error setup, that I get exactly what I'm looking for every time with this lens. And I think that because it's on a budget, it packs a huge whopping punch with that 1.4, that quick autofocus, and the build. It lacks a few things, but we'll get to that. I think definitely something pro would be the bokeh that this lens offers. It really has a nice depth of field, and it really feels nice and creamy when you can focus in on that subject tightly and get the background to the depth that you want it. When talking about bokeh, I am referring to, that aesthetic quality of the blur in the in and out of focus parts of an image. It's not just about the amount of blur, but rather how the lens renders those blurred areas. When you see a soft, smooth circles of light in the background or foreground, that's considered good bokeh. Actually, different lenses create bokeh differently due to their optical designs, and the lenses with larger apertures often yield more pleasing results. This lens has a creamy background blur and adds a professional touch to every shot. I also believe that the lens has an excellent close-up shooting ability. It achieves stunning close-ups with a minimum focus distance of just 0.3 meters. And as I've mentioned, it's competitively priced. Right now on B&H for just $279 compared to other f1.4 lenses at this focal length, like the Tamiya 23mm priced for the same thing. But this only uses 2 SD elements versus the Viltrox, which uses 2 EDs and 2 HR elements and offers I think a sharper image. A little more well-known brand is the Sigma, but it also appears the biggest difference in the Sigma, or the only difference, is that it has weather sealing. And maybe the name, and I think that's probably what you're paying for in this scenario. That one is priced at about $549. I also want to mention that I am here using the 23mm Viltrox. You can see that it's got a great blur to the background. I'm nice in focus. It's a little more pushed in on the way that I'm using it right now. It does have a 52mm thread. So if you're adding any step ups or any ND filters, that's the size that you want to be looking for, is 52mm. So I also do have to mention some cons. Some of the biggest cons, one that I've heard about but I haven't really had a problem with, is the motor making noise when autofocusing. I think it's pretty silent. I don't think I hear it in this video in any sort of way. Sometimes I also use a mic, off-camera mic, so that could be the fact that I'm not hearing the motor function for the video quality, but I find that it's smooth and pretty silent in that scenario. A huge disappointment for me in this lens, and maybe the reason that it is only $279, is the fact that it doesn't have any in-body stabilization. What the in-body stabilization does is really helps cameras that don't already have it, especially when I'm using the Sony A61 here, that I need that little bit of extra help. My Tamron 17 to 70mm has it, so that's oftentimes what I'll use when moving around. But for a more static shot, I think the lens doesn't generally or necessarily need it. So I hope that with that in mind, you just use it correctly. Don't expect it to give you the most stable shots when you're trying to run up and down a field. The handheld's really not going to give you the stability that you're looking for. Another small but kind of a thing that I think would probably just make it a little bit more expensive, and the thing that the Sigma had, is that weather sealing. The weather sealing does help from dust and debris getting into the lens there. But most of your cameras in the higher end are going to come with that weather sealing, and hopefully that kind of negates this. And then this one is a personal. The aperture ring on the lens is so sensitive that if you're not careful, it will often move itself over to the f/16, and you're looking through the viewfinder and you're confused as why it's black. That's because you've accidentally tapped just this little nudge on the lens at some point, and it's completely taken it out of the settings that you had it in, even in manual focus or aperture priority. So that little bit of inconvenience is what kind of takes me sometimes out of, would I buy this one again? The image quality is great. The blur, the bokeh, all those things that I've mentioned make it to me worth every penny. I do wish they could figure out a better click system for that aperture ring. Okay, so in summary, I believe that the Viltrox 23mm is a versatile, worth it lens for most Sony E-mount photographers. It does lack some high-end functions like weather sealing and in-body stabilization, but I believe that the features it does have makes it worth every penny and worth adding to your bag. Whether you're a street photographer, a portrait photographer, or a content creator, I believe this lens has a lot to offer. So consider the pros and cons based on your specific needs, and I think you're going to have a great time with this lens. Until next time, happy shooting. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like and subscribe button for more Shutter Media photography and gear reviews. Again, see you till next time. Until then, keep capturing those moments.